Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update to the U.S. presidential election series. So, it's been pretty wild this week. You'll see when I go over the polling tracking. So, unlike previous weeks where I've felt pretty confident about the result I'm about to show you, I'm not feeling very confident about this because the polling's been wild. Literally, like yesterday, or 2 days ago, sorry, Monday, Biden was leading by a good chunk. Trump's leading by a little bit. And it's like, when you're talking about like 2 days between who's in front and who's in back, so like this is the most likely outcome what I'm about to show you, but most likely it's very loose terms, but I will get it started here. Though I will note that the best and worst case scenarios haven't actually moved very much, so the margins I'm confident in. It's just how likely this most likely scenario is, I'm questioning. But we'll get into it. So, to start with Democrat safe states, we got California, Hawaii, to the surprise of nobody, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and District of Columbia. No surprises. Anyone who's surprised about these states doesn't know U.S. politics. At all. Moving into GOP safe states, we got Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, which is safer for Trump than it was last week. But Montana is just kind of fluctuating in between safe and likely. I think at one point it was lean, so it has a lot of movement in it, but it seems like it's pretty safely in Trump's column. We got North, South Dakota, Nebraska 2nd, 1st, 3rd, not Kansas. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and West Virginia. These are GOP safe. Again, not a lot of surprises here. The safe states are stabilizing, and I think the likely states are also stabilizing. So the amount of play in the field seems to be reducing here as we go forward, which is to be expected in an election season. You would expect at the start there's a lot of play in the field, and as it gets closer and closer to election day, the amount of play is going down. Moving into the Democrat likely, we got Washington, barely, it's almost safe. Not Pennsylvania. I was trying to click Maryland there. Maryland, again, barely, it is almost a safe state. Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Maine's first. Moving to the Republican likelies, we got Kansas, Missouri, South Carolina, and North Carolina. North Carolina is the only interesting one in here, given the last 4 elections. It was a much more competitive state than Georgia, but I forgot Alaska. Sorry. But that said, states change, populations change, so that's not amazingly surprising, and the polling could be wrong in North Carolina and Georgia. We'll find out on election day, or when all the votes are in, whenever that happens. Moving to the Democrat lean states, we got New Mexico, Colorado, Illinois, Delaware, New Jersey, and Maine at large. So the interesting one here is Illinois. There was a couple polls earlier this week where Illinois moved much more towards the center, which is surprising. I don't know if that is going to be if that was just a fluke in the polling, or if that is going to be more of a trend, and Illinois is going to be in a more competitive situation than it has been in previous elections. That's something that's going to be hard to tell until we get more polls, or we the election happens. Like there's not a lot of state level polling in some of these really safe states like Illinois or like Washington or California. Like they don't get polled very often. So when one poll does happen and the poll says it's really close, it drastically changes the field, even if that one poll was a fluke, because most properly done scientific polls only have a 95% chance of actually having the real result in their confidence interval. So we'll see. I'm a bit skeptical about Illinois, but that's the numbers. Moving into Republican lean, we got Arizona, Iowa, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine second. Now, here's some other ones that I'm a bit skeptical on here. I'm very skeptical about Virginia. The rest of them, I'm not amazingly skeptical. I will note, actually, on here, before anyone runs the comments and like blah yells, some of these states, like up here, like Michigan and Ohio, are actually really, really close to being a tilt. I think Michigan's like just far enough. It is like the tilt threshold is 2% or lower. It's like 2.1%. So Ohio is also fairly close to. I don't recall the exact margin for Ohio. Virginia is a very similar state, though. Like Illinois, there was a bunch of polls this week which showed it a lot tighter in Virginia than people had been showing before. And again, that might be right, because if you look all the way back in December, Trump was leading in Virginia. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that Trump could win Virginia. It's just the amount of there's such a small number of polls that happen in Virginia that one poll has such an outsized effect on it. I'm a bit skeptical about that result. And what's more, if I recall correctly, that poll was on like Monday, so it's a very soon poll, and there's not a lot of other polls to balance it out. So we'll see, but apparently Virginia's in play. Oh, I made a mistake earlier. Oregon's a lean Democrat state. Sorry about that. Now moving into the tilt column. For Democrats, we got tilt Nevada and Maine second. That's Nebraska second. There was a bunch of polls that were showing Biden just barely eking out Nebraska second, and I mean that carries forward. He's barely eking it out now. Nevada's swinging all over the place. Nevada gets a lot of polls relative to, I mean, it's a classic swing state, so it gets a lot of polling, state level polling, and literally they're wild. Like some will be like tie, 1 point lead to Biden, 10-point lead to Biden. I think there was even one that had Trump leading, and it's like, come on, people. This is why I have I have high expectations that all the polling aggregators, including myself, are probably going to get a lot of wrong calls this election, because just look at the favorability, the approval ratings for Trump, right? You'll have some pollsters who are having Trump at like -2, -4, +2, and then you have others that are like -8, -9, -10. Then sometimes you have -14 to -22 range, and it's like that range is just so big. There's no way all of these, and they'll be in the same week. You'll get all these different polls, and it's like it's a moving target, and it changes every single instant. Basically, it's a constantly updating moving target approval rating. But it's inane to me that the polling is this wildly inconsistent. Like, Canadian polling's a lot tighter. Even wild ones that pop up occasionally, like Ledger, when they have their BC results being very different than everyone else in Canada, they're consistently that much. But like, you'll see like a political Mourning Consult will have 1 week was minus 22, the next week was minus 14, and it's like, and then like you get these huge swings in one pollster in week over the course of a week, and it's like, what? Not saying Mourning Consult is necessarily wrong. I'm saying that the polling is wild, and if it's correct, I think this is a reasonable outcome as of today. I don't think this outcome would hold has much predictive. This particular result has much predictive power, but we'll see. I don't have much confidence in this one. It's just there was just so much polling the polling's been so swingy the last like 4 days. I don't have much confidence in this scenario, but this is what the model says. So the model says this. We'll see. Now going into the best case for Trump. So this has been pretty stable. Trump's best case scenario really hasn't moved much. Really, the only differences that have happened is Texas is a safe state now. He's gotten a bit more support in the New Hampshire, Maine area. Virginia's a bit safer. Illinois is a bit less safe, but that's by proxy the same, or because that can be seen from the Maine prediction. New Mexico's barely in his column, but since it's a best case scenario, it is put in his column. Normally, it would be a toss-up. Really not much to say here. This is pretty constant. That this seat total of 355 is constant, more or less. Like, it fluctuates by like 355 seems to be his saturation point. He obviously does have the theoretical possibility of winning 399 on this because it's relatively easy to win a toss-up state or a tilt state in this model. If I'm like slightly wrong, but my model seems to have him at have a ceiling about 355 for his best case scenarios, and his best case scenario has like a floor of like 330. So that seems where it fluctuates from after about 7 weeks into this. Moving into Biden's best case scenario. This one's really wild, actually, because this best case scenario suggests theoretically that that it could go anywhere from Trump having a comfortable win of like 294 to Biden having like a pretty, I don't want to quite say a landslide because I think mid 300s isn't quite landslide, but like pretty close to a landslide of mental math, 338 electoral votes. So it's quite amusing actually how much plays in this. I will note some things for viewers at home. Ohio and Arizona are barely in Trump's column in this, but since it is the best case scenarios, I'm not throwing things on toss-ups. They are going into that party's column no matter how barely they are in it. Florida's a bit more comfortable. These tilts of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are fairly close to leans. New Hampshire is much more competitive. But yeah, that's those are the scenarios. Now to move into the actual raw data so you can kind of see what I mean. So last week it was like here, and then we had a couple days, where was it? Here we go, yeah. This was last week, right? This is where it was in the polls. Then we had a couple days where Trump's lead went down a bit, Biden had stabilized, and Biden shot up. And then he shuts down, and then Trump shoots up, and it's like, what? So, yeah. I mean, there's really not much to say about this. it's really bumpy like that, and I only made the video because I'm making a video every single week on Thursdays. Otherwise, I wouldn't have released this result, because like when you see this kind of like this bumping here for both parties, such a drastic bump in such a short period of time, that's just saying that it's completely unstable. And I think it makes sense why it's completely unstable right now, because you just had the debate the other day. So depending on who you poll, the debate's going to give people strong feelings some way or another. So if you get the right subset that really think Trump did great, or really think Trump did bad, or vice versa for Biden, it's going to drastically affect the results. I think next week it will probably have stabilized a bit more, and next week will give a more useful and meaningful result. Talk about this graph for a second. So I think I'm going to discontinue this one because it is the overlap here is so high that I think we're losing meaningful, like the correlation for Trump is going down, correlation for Biden's going down. So this is losing predictive power as it's going forward. I think Trump has gained the ground he's going to gain, and now he's just riding the Trump and Biden are basically at their saturation points, and they're just riding the weekly surges. So when I say saturation points, like if you're at the point, from what I can tell for this, it looks about 48% for both of them on my model. So that's the two-way votes. That's ignoring. No, that's not two-way vote. That's their actual vote. So they're roughly riding about the 48% margin. You can kind of look here. Looks to be about 48%. Sometimes above, sometimes below. They seem to be hovering around 48. And you have the margin of error on either side, so their result can be anywhere in that margin of error. So it looks like at this point they seem to be in a statistical tie in voter support. But so what it looks like it's going to come down to is turnout in this election and voter enthusiasm, because it looks like by my model, both parties look like they're going, or both Trump and Biden look like they're going to get about the same number of votes. Possibly Biden has I don't even want to say Biden has a bigger edge. Biden has more volatility in his numbers. Trump's been pretty reliably gets 47, 48 by my model, from like when the polling demographic data is plugged into my model and the prediction is put out. Like Trump's pretty comfortably sitting at 47, 48 for most polls, but he occasionally gets polls that put him up to like 50, which actually, I don't normally do this, but we can see here. Like we had one poll. This is the poll result that's after been plugged into my model. Gave him 50, and that was the last poll before this update, which is why he just had this big bump. So that's what we see. So we'll figure it out. If you liked the video, please like, share, subscribe, comment below if you want to discuss the polling, if you want to talk about the debate that happened, or my thoughts on these things. Feel free to ask questions, make comments, make jokes. Just be civil. Otherwise, have a good day, everybody, and hopefully next week gives us more stable numbers, so my result isn't probably meaningless.